Why did the general stop mid-sentence, like he'd just seen a ghost, over something as small as a hand gesture? Captain Amanda Carter had rehearsed everything except that moment. The walk down the Pentagon corridor, the weight of her dress uniform, the rhythm of her breathing, even the questions she expected to be asked. But she hadn't rehearsed the silence, the kind that drains the air from a room and makes time hesitate. She'd only adjusted her sleeve. A small motion, habit more than intent. Her fingers moved once, precise and unconscious, and that was when General Marcus Thompson froze. He'd been speaking about modern officers, about theory versus experience. His voice had carried that familiar edge, half lesson, half challenge. Then his words simply stopped. His eyes locked onto her hand as if it didn't belong to her. Amanda felt it before she understood it, that tightening in the chest, the quiet internal alarm she hadn't felt in years, not fear exactly, recognition. The general's face lost color, not the dramatic kind you see in movies, just a slow draining like someone dimming a light. His mouth opened, then closed. For a man who had commanded divisions and buried friends, he looked unsteady. "How," he finally whispered, "do you know that signal?" The question didn't echo. It didn't need to. It sat between them, heavy and dangerous. Amanda said nothing. Silence had saved her before. Silence was often safer than truth. She kept her posture perfect, eyes forward, hands resting exactly where regulation demanded. Inside, her thoughts moved fast and controlled. She counted breaths, 4 in, 4 out. Don't react, don't explain. General Thompson straightened, the soldier returning to his spine. He stepped toward his desk, one hand hovering over the secure phone like it was already ringing. "I'll ask you again," he said, voice colder now. "How do you know a signal used only by Black Ops teams?" Amanda's throat tightened. 3 years of discipline pressed against her ribs. 3 years of not saying names, not writing things down, not correcting people when they were wrong. She learned long ago that the hardest missions weren't the loud ones. They were the quiet ones, the ones that followed you home. "I can't answer that, sir." The click of the phone was final. By the time the door sealed and the first security officers entered, Amanda understood something fundamental had shifted. Whatever protection silence had given her was gone. The past she'd locked away had noticed her. And it was stepping forward. 6 hours later, exhaustion felt like a second skin. The room was underground. No windows, no clocks, just recycled air and fluorescent lights that never softened. They changed faces every hour, different uniforms, same questions. They went through her life like it was evidence. Deployments, gaps, friends, money, the way she spoke, the way she didn't. 8 months unaccounted for, one of them said, tapping the file. No base, no unit, no paper trail. "I was assigned to a classified tasking," Amanda replied evenly. "Funny," another voice said. "No one seems to remember you." They wanted a crack, a slip, a word out of order. Amanda gave them none. But inside something frayed. She remembered heat, dust, a language she'd learned too quickly, faces she'd tried not to remember. The moment when she'd realized the mission was already compromised, and the team didn't know yet. The interrogators changed tactics, friendly, aggressive, sympathetic, accusing. "You're either protecting something," a woman finally said, leaning forward, "or someone. Which is it?" Amanda stared at the table. Neither answer would save her. When the door finally opened again, it wasn't another interrogator. It was Admiral Mitchell. He shut the door, turned off the recorder, activated a jammer that hummed like an insect. Then he looked at her, not like an officer, not like a suspect, but like someone recognizing a survivor. "Captain Carter," he said quietly, "or should I say Jessica Morgan?" Amanda's breath caught. The name hit her harder than the interrogation ever could. The rest came out slowly. Syria, the cover, the cell that had played them, The morning she'd found the safe house empty, the radio screaming with panic, the choice she hadn't been trained for. Stay hidden or save them. She'd chosen wrong by the book. Right by the cost. 8 men had made it home because of that decision. None of them could ever say her name. The Pentagon never liked ghosts, but sometimes ghosts were necessary. When General Thompson stood in front of her again, his voice was different. No tests, no edge. "I misjudged you," he said, "and I nearly destroyed something this country depends on." Amanda accepted the words without ceremony. As she left the building that evening, the river reflecting a quiet sky, she felt something unfamiliar. Not triumph. Release. Some truths aren't meant to be spoken loudly. They're meant to be carried. And sometimes, dignity doesn't explain itself. It simply acts. Why did the silence feel louder after the door closed, like the building itself was waiting for her to fail? The room didn't change when the interrogators left. Same table, same chair that was just uncomfortable enough to keep her awake. Same fluorescent lights humming like they were bored with human suffering. But something inside Amanda shifted the moment the lock engaged. She felt it settle in her bones. This was no longer about answers. It was about endurance. She rolled her shoulders once, slow and subtle, easing the stiffness that came from hours of stillness. Her wrists ached where they'd rested on the table. Her eyes burned. She hadn't cried, not once. Crying was a luxury she'd learned to postpone indefinitely. She wondered briefly if this was how it would end. Not in some distant desert or dark hallway overseas, but here, in a quiet room, buried under questions that were technically polite and professionally devastating. The door opened again. Different faces this time, younger, sharper, the kind that still believed systems always worked. "Captain Carter," the man said, sitting down without offering his name. "We're going to start over." Amanda nodded, not in agreement, in acknowledgement. There was a difference. They asked about her childhood first, not because it mattered, but because people forgot themselves when they talked about home. She gave them just enough. Military family, learned to move without rooting, learned early that attachment had a price. "Why intelligence?" the woman asked. "Because information lasts longer than orders," Amanda replied. The woman wrote that down. Amanda noticed the pause, the slight tightening around her mouth. Some answers landed whether you wanted them to or not. Hours blurred, time lost meaning in that room. They brought water, no food. They didn't need to starve her body. They wanted to exhaust her mind. They circled back to the signal. "You didn't deny knowing it," someone pointed out. "I didn't confirm it either." "But you reacted." Amanda finally looked up. Her eyes were steady but tired. Everyone reacts to something eventually. The man across from her leaned back. "Only if it matters." That was the trap. Admit it mattered and you admitted knowledge. Deny it mattered and you insulted their intelligence. She said nothing. Silence stretched again. This time it was intentional. Amanda had learned in places far from this room that silence made people reveal more than pressure ever could. Humans hated empty space. They filled it with assumptions, with mistakes. "You're protecting someone," the woman said finally. Amanda felt the words brush against something raw. She thought of Rodriguez's voice over the radio. Calm, even when everything was falling apart. She thought of the youngest one, barely 20, who'd shaken once when the shooting started, then steadied himself because someone was counting on him. "I'm protecting a mission," Amanda said quietly. The man smiled like he'd caught her. "Missions end." "Some don't," she replied. That answer ended the session. When they left her alone again, the quiet pressed in harder than before. Amanda leaned back and closed her eyes, not to rest but to organize. Fatigue was dangerous. Fatigue made you sentimental, sloppy. She returned to Syria without meaning to. The heat had been relentless. the kind that settled into your thoughts and slowed them down. Her cover had been simple, too simple maybe. She played the role she was given with careful restraint, never too curious, never too confident. The first week she'd slept lightly. The second she'd stopped sleeping altogether. She'd noticed things then, patterns that didn't fit, a look held too long, a question asked twice in different ways. The cell was testing her, the same way Thompson had tested her in his office, the same way the interrogators were doing now. Everyone tested everyone. By the third week she knew. The intelligence she was feeding back was being used, but not the way it should have been. Operations were adjusting too cleanly. Safe houses were changing too fast. Someone was watching the watchers. She sent a warning, carefully worded, nothing explicit, just a suggestion that assumptions needed to be reevaluated. The reply came back delayed. Maintain position. Orders were orders until they were. The morning everything collapsed, the city had been too quiet. Amanda remembered that more than anything. No usual arguments outside, no vendors shouting, silence in a place that thrived on noise. She reached the safe house early. The door had been unlocked. That was mistake number one. Inside, the air smelled wrong, metallic, final. She didn't go farther than the entryway. She didn't need to. The message on the wall said everything. The Americans are here. They'd known for how long she still didn't know, long enough. Her radio had crackled to life moments later. Rodriguez, breathing hard, gunfire in the background. Contact, he'd said, not panicked, focused. Multiple hostiles, we're pinned. She closed her eyes then, just for a second. Because she understood the math instantly. Extraction compromised, backup too far, her cover still intact for now. If she stayed silent, she might walk away. Another ghost slipping through cracks no one liked to examine. If she spoke, everything burned. She remembered thinking, not about heroism, not about duty, but about weight. How some choices followed you forever, and others followed you only until you made them. She'd chosen. She blew the cover with one transmission, short, precise, using protocols she'd memorized and hoped she'd never need. The counter signal. The one Thompson had recognized. The one that said, I am not who you think I am, but I'm on your side. Back in the interrogation room, Amanda opened her eyes. Her chest felt tight, not from fear, from memory. The door opened again. This time, only one person entered. Admiral Mitchell moved with the ease of someone who didn't need to assert authority. He turned off the recorder without looking at it, jammed the room, sat down slowly. For a long moment, he just studied her. You look exactly the same, he said. Amanda almost laughed, almost cried. Instead, she swallowed. You look older, sir. He nodded. War does that, even when you don't get credit for it. They spoke quietly, carefully, like two people handling something fragile. When she finished explaining the Pentagon incident, Mitchell's jaw tightened. Thompson's a good man, he said, but good men can still break things they don't understand. What happens now? Amanda asked. Mitchell leaned back, exhaling. Now we decide whether the truth helps or harms. Amanda looked at her hands, the same hands that had betrayed her, with a reflexive motion. I never wanted recognition. I know, he said. That's why this is complicated. The room felt smaller suddenly, like all the walls were listening. I did what I was ordered to do, she said, and then I did what I thought was right. Mitchell's eyes softened. Those two things don't always overlap. They sat in silence again, but this time it was shared. Outside, the Pentagon continued breathing. Phones rang, meetings started, lives moved forward. Inside, Amanda waited, not for forgiveness, not for praise. Just for the weight to shift. Because sometimes, the hardest part of service isn't the sacrifice itself. It's surviving long enough to be seen, without being erased. What do you do when the truth finally has a voice, but you're not sure it should be heard? Amanda felt the question before anyone asked it. It lived in the quiet after Admiral Mitchell stopped speaking, in the way his fingers rested against the edge of the table like they were holding something back. The room seemed to contract around them, as if the walls themselves understood the weight of what remained unsaid. Outside, the Pentagon moved with mechanical certainty. Inside, time stalled. Mitchell broke the silence first. "General Thompson has already escalated this," he said. "Once that happens, it stops being about you." Amanda nodded. She'd known that the moment the secure line went dead, systems didn't like anomalies, and she had become one. "They'll want a narrative," Mitchell continued. "Something clean, something that explains why a captain knows things she shouldn't." "And if there isn't one?" "There's always one," he replied. "The question is whether it's accurate or convenient." Amanda leaned back slightly, the chair creaking beneath her. Her body ached now, not sharply, dully, the kind of ache that came from holding yourself together for too long. She thought of the younger interrogators, the way they'd watched her like a puzzle they were determined to solve. They didn't hate her. That was the dangerous part. They believed they were protecting something. "So what am I?" she asked quietly. "A liability?" Mitchell didn't answer immediately. He looked at her the way commanders looked at maps, searching for terrain, risks, and routes that didn't exist yet. "You're a contradiction," he finally said, "and institutions don't handle those well." The door opened without warning. General Thompson entered with two aides, their faces unreadable. The general's posture was rigid, but his eyes betrayed fatigue, not physical, moral. "Admiral Thompson," said, nodding. "Captain." Amanda stood automatically. He gestured for her to sit. "We've confirmed portions of what Admiral Mitchell briefed me on," Thompson said. "Not everything. Enough." He paused, choosing his words with care. Amanda recognized the look. She'd seen it on men deciding whether to cross lines they'd sworn to protect. "The signal you used," he continued, "is part of a contingency protocol, a last resort identifier." "Yes, sir." "It was retired." "Yes, sir." Only 3 people outside the teams knew it. Amanda didn't respond. She didn't need to. Thompson exhaled slowly. "That means someone trusted you more than procedure." The sentence wasn't an accusation. It was an observation, one that carried weight. "You understand," he said, "that officially acknowledging this creates problems." Amanda met his gaze. "I understand that pretending it didn't happen creates others." For a moment Thompson almost smiled. Almost. He turned to Mitchell. "If we proceed quietly, we can bury this under commendations and reassignment." Amanda's chest tightened. "And if we do?" Mitchell asked. "Then we open doors that don't close cleanly." Amanda felt something stir, an old instinct, not defiance, clarity. "With respect, sir," she said, "I didn't spend 3 years pretending to be invisible just to become a footnote." The room stilled. Thompson studied her again, this time not as a test, as a calculation. "What do you want, Captain?" The question caught her off guard. No one had asked her that in a long time. Missions had objectives. Covers had boundaries. Wanting things was dangerous. She answered anyway. "I want the record to reflect the truth," she said. "Not the details. Just the fact that the choice I made wasn't a breach. It was an order I gave myself when no one else could." Silence followed, heavy, deliberate. Thompson nodded once. "That's a risk." "Yes, sir." "On all of us." Amanda didn't look away. "I know." The general turned toward the door. "Leave us," he told his aides. When they were gone, he spoke again, lower now. "I've spent my career believing control was the same as leadership," he said. "That uncertainty was weakness." He looked at Amanda. "You complicate that belief." She didn't know what to say to that. "Here, what will happen," Thompson said. "There will be a closed review, limited visibility, no press, no transcripts." Amanda's shoulders loosened slightly. "You will be reassigned," he continued, "not as punishment, as protection." "And the operation?" she asked. Mitchell answered this time. "It remains sealed, as it should." Amanda nodded. That part at least felt right. The meeting ended without ceremony. No handshakes, no speeches, just quiet acknowledgement. As she was escorted out, Amanda caught her reflection in the polished hallway wall. She looked older than she felt, or maybe the opposite. She wasn't sure anymore. Hours later, alone in temporary quarters, she sat on the edge of the bed fully dressed. Sleep felt impossible. Her mind replayed moments she'd kept buried. The bloodstain, the radio static, the moment she'd realized the price of speaking. She thought about the team. Rodriguez had sent her one message after the extraction. No names, no thanks. Just still breathing, because of you. She'd never replied. Not because she didn't want to, because some acknowledgments were too dangerous to exist. Her phone vibrated softly. A secure message, short. "Briefing at 600, new assignment." No congratulations, no explanations. Amanda lay back, staring at the ceiling. She felt hollow, but not broken. There was a strange peace in knowing the worst was over, that the truth had surfaced just enough to let her breathe again. But peace was temporary, she knew that too. Before dawn, she found herself standing by the window, watching the city wake up. Lights flickered on. Traffic resumed. People moved forward, unaware of the quiet decisions that shaped their safety. She placed her hand against the glass. The same hand that had betrayed her. The same hand that had saved lives. Amanda understood something then, something she'd avoided for years. Redemption wasn't about being forgiven. It was about being willing to stand still long enough for the consequences to find you. And when they did, not flinching. What happens when you're sent back into the dark, not because you failed, but because you succeeded too quietly? Amanda didn't sleep. She lay on the narrow bed fully dressed, boots aligned with military precision beside the wall, eyes fixed on the faint crack in the ceiling where two concrete slabs met. The building hummed softly around her. Ventilation, distant footsteps, the low murmur of a place that never truly rested. She counted those sounds the way she once counted breaths under fire. Not to relax, to stay anchored. At 4:30 she stopped trying. By 600 she was walking into a briefing room she didn't recognize, escorted by an officer who didn't introduce himself and didn't ask questions. The walls were bare. No flags, no unit insignia, just a long table and a screen already glowing. 3 people waited, 2 in uniform, 1 in civilian clothes. The civilian stood when she entered, middle-aged, calm, the kind of calm that didn't come from confidence, but from experience surviving mistakes. "Captain Carter," he said, "or whatever name you'll be using next." Amanda took her seat. "I'd prefer to know who I'm speaking to." He smiled faintly. "You wouldn't." "Fair enough." The screen behind him shifted, displaying satellite imagery. A coastline, sparse infrastructure. Desert pushing up against water like it was reclaiming ground inch by inch. "We have a problem," he said, "and we think you understand problems that don't announce themselves." Amanda studied the image. No obvious targets, no dramatic markers, just subtle patterns. Roads that curved oddly. Buildings that looked too new or too neglected. "What's the ask?" she said. The man clicked to the next slide. A blurred photograph. A face partially obscured. Female. Late 20s, maybe early 30s. Eyes sharp even through distortion. "Asset went dark 3 days ago," he said. "Deep cover, communications specialist." Amanda felt a familiar tightening in her chest. Disappearances always started the same way, with silence. "Why me?" she asked. One of the uniformed officers spoke, because whoever compromised her knew exactly where to look. The implication landed hard. "They're testing," the civilian added, "just like they tested you." Amanda exhaled slowly. "You're asking me to find someone who's already been found." "We're asking you to decide whether she's still alive," he said. "And if she is, whether saving her is worth what it will cost." There it was, the question behind every mission no one liked to phrase directly. Amanda thought of the safe house, the blood stain, the message on the wall. "I don't do clean extractions," she said. The civilian nodded. "Neither do we." By noon she was airborne. Different aircraft, different call sign, same feeling in her gut as the ground dropped away. Amanda stared out the small window, watching the landscape dissolve into abstraction. From this height everything looked manageable. Lines, shapes, problems that could be solved with enough distance. Up close was where things went wrong. She reviewed the file again. Sparse, deliberately so. The asset's name was redacted. Her training mirrored Amanda's in unsettling ways: language acquisition, pattern recognition, an ability to disappear inside roles without losing herself. At least, that's what the evaluation claimed. Amanda knew better. Losing yourself was always part of the job. The trick was deciding which parts you could afford not to get back. The insertion was quiet. No dramatics, no rushing pulse, just the steady rhythm of practiced movement and the soft crunch of boots on sand. She moved alone. That was intentional. Solo work gave you no one to impress, no one to blame, just your judgment and the consequences that followed. The town was smaller than the satellite images suggested, or maybe emptier. People moved cautiously, like they were aware of being observed even when they couldn't see the observer. Amanda blended easily. She learned long ago that invisibility wasn't about hiding. It was about fitting the expectations of the environment so completely that no one bothered to question you. She listened more than she spoke, watched hands, counted doors, marked exits she hoped she wouldn't need. By the second day, she knew. The asset wasn't gone, she was contained. The pattern was subtle, too subtle for anyone unfamiliar with the language of pressure. Certain checkpoints tightened. Certain faces reappeared in places they didn't belong. Someone was waiting for a reaction. For her. Amanda adjusted accordingly. She made mistakes on purpose, let herself be seen once where she shouldn't have been, missed a turn, asked a question that bordered on careless. The net tightened. That night, in a narrow alley that smelled of rust and old water, she was approached. No weapons drawn, no raised voices. "You're not very good at pretending," the woman said, stepping out of shadow. Amanda recognized her instantly, the eyes sharper in person. "You're not very good at disappearing," Amanda replied. The woman smiled, tired, relieved, afraid. "They sent you," she said. "Yes." "Why?" Amanda hesitated. Honesty mattered here, not full truth, but something real. "Because I know what it costs to stay silent too long." They moved quickly after that. No heroics, no speeches, just two professionals navigating the narrow space between attention and survival. The asset, she finally learned her name was Lena, had been compromised weeks ago. Not violently, methodically. Someone had noticed how she listened, how she remembered things she shouldn't. "They didn't arrest me," Lena said as they moved. "They wanted to see who would come." Amanda nodded. "They always do." Extraction wasn't immediate. It never was. They had to wait, to misdirect, to let the pressure release just enough that pursuit grew sloppy. During the wait, they talked, not about missions, about things that didn't fit in reports. Lena admitted she'd almost broken, that the silence had felt endless, that she'd started to doubt whether anyone would risk pulling her out. "I wouldn't have blamed them," she said quietly. Amanda looked at her. "Yes, you would have." Lena laughed softly. Yeah, I would have. The moment of departure came without warning. A window, a signal, movement timed to distraction elsewhere. As they crossed the final threshold, Amanda felt it again. That familiar weight, the one that settled after a decision you couldn't undo. They made it out. Barely. On the flight back, Lena slept immediately, exhaustion claiming her without ceremony. Amanda stayed awake, watching the horizon shift from darkness to pale light. She thought about Thompson, about Mitchell, about systems that needed people like her but preferred not to acknowledge them. She wondered how many others were out there, carrying truths they couldn't share, living between names. When they landed, Lena was taken one way, Amanda another. No debrief yet, no thanks. Just a nod from the civilian who'd briefed her days earlier. Good work, he said. You made the right call. Amanda paused. I made a call. He studied her for a moment. That's all any of us ever do. Later, alone again, Amanda finally allowed herself to sit. Really sit. The adrenaline drained, leaving behind a hollow ache that felt almost peaceful. She realized something then. Redemption wasn't a destination. It wasn't a medal or a cleared record. It was a series of choices made when no one was watching. And sometimes, the only proof you'd ever have that you mattered was that someone else got to go home. What stays with you after the mission ends, when the noise fades but the weight does? Amanda felt it the moment the transport doors closed behind her. That subtle shift. The body standing down while the mind refused to follow. She walked through the corridor on autopilot, boots echoing softly against polished floors, her reflection appearing and disappearing in glass panels like a reminder she wasn't fully present. The debrief room was smaller than she expected. No windows, no flags, just a table, a screen, and 2 chairs already occupied. Lena wasn't there. Amanda noted the absence immediately, not because she needed reassurance, but because separation always meant the story was being split, fragmented, sanitized. The civilian from the briefing nodded once as she entered. The uniformed officer beside him didn't look up from his tablet. Sit, the civilian said. Amanda did. They didn't start with questions. They started with silence, a familiar tactic, one she'd used herself. How is she? Amanda finally asked. Alive, the officer replied without emotion. Stabilizing, she'll disappear for a while. Amanda nodded. Disappearing had become a form of currency. The screen lit up, showing timestamps, routes, satellite stills. The mission laid bare in clean lines and neutral language. No mention of fear. No acknowledgement of the moment in the alley when Lena's hand had shaken just slightly before steadying. You deviated from the recommended extraction window, the officer said. Yes. Why? Amanda leaned back, because the window was visible. The civilian smiled faintly. That's consistent with your file. The officer frowned. You exposed yourself. I controlled the exposure. Same thing, the officer said. No, Amanda replied quietly. It is. Silence again, thicker now. You're developing a pattern, the officer said. Independent judgment, field-level improvisation. Amanda met his gaze. That's called thinking. It's called risk, he shot back. The civilian raised a hand. Enough. He turned to Amanda. You saved an asset without igniting a larger response. That matters. Amanda didn't respond. Praise felt uncomfortable. It always had. Praise suggested permanence, and nothing about her life felt permanent. What happens now? She asked. The civilian glanced at the officer, then back at her. Now we decide how long we can keep using you. There it was, the truth stripped of ceremony. Amanda exhaled slowly, and after that. The civilian hesitated, just a fraction, but she saw it. There is no after, he said. The debrief ended without resolution. That was becoming a pattern too. Later, alone in temporary housing that felt intentionally forgettable, Amanda sat on the edge of the bed and finally removed her boots. Her hands lingered on the laces longer than necessary. She stared at the faint scars on her knuckles, old, new, overlapping. She thought of Lena again, of the moment she'd asked, half joking, half serious, "Do they ever let you stop?" Amanda hadn't answered then. She still didn't have one. Sleep came in fragments that night, not dreams, memories. Syria, the alley, the Pentagon corridor, Thompson's face when recognition hit him too late. She woke before dawn, heart racing, convinced for a brief, irrational moment that she'd missed something critical, that someone was waiting for her to make another mistake. No one was. That unsettled her more. The days that followed were quiet, too quiet. No briefings, no assignments, just waiting, the kind of waiting that hollowed you out if you weren't careful. Amanda filled the time with routines, running at odd hours, reviewing material she didn't need to review, cleaning a room that was already spotless. She avoided mirrors. On the fourth day, she received a message. Walk 1900, River. No sender, no explanation. She almost ignored it, almost. At dusk, she found herself walking along the Potomac, the air cool and sharp. The city moved around her, joggers, couples, tourists taking photos of monuments that symbolized ideals most people never had to test. She spotted Admiral Mitchell before he spoke. He leaned against the railing, hands in his coat pockets, gaze fixed on the water. "You look like hell," he said mildly. "You look retired," she replied. He smiled. "I am mostly." They stood side by side for a while without speaking. The river moved steadily, indifferent to the conversations it absorbed. "I heard about the extraction," Mitchell said. "Clean work." "It wasn't clean," Amanda replied. "It never is," he agreed. She hesitated, then asked the question that had been pressing on her for days. "How long can this go on?" Mitchell didn't pretend to misunderstand. "As long as you let it." "That's not an answer. It's the only honest one." She watched the water. "I don't know how to stop." Mitchell nodded. "Most people don't. They confuse usefulness with worth." The words hit harder than she expected. "I chose this," she said, "every time." "Yes," he replied gently, "but choices made under obligation still cost you." Amanda swallowed. "Do you regret it?" Mitchell was quiet for a long time. Then, "I regret the people I forgot to be when I wasn't in uniform." She turned to him. "What would you do differently?" He met her gaze. "I'd listened sooner, to the part of me that knew when it was time to step back." Amanda looked away. The idea felt foreign, dangerous. "They'll keep calling," she said. "Yes. And if I don't answer?" "They'll find someone else," he said, less experienced, more eager. The familiar pressure returned, the quiet guilt, the sense that saying no was an act of abandonment. Mitchell seemed to read it on her face. "You're not responsible for the entire system," he said, "just for the choices you make inside it." They walked for a while after that, not far, just enough to let the conversation settle. Before they parted, Mitchell stopped. "You did good," he said, "not because you followed orders, because you understood the cost and paid it anyway." Amanda nodded. Praise still felt heavy, but this time it felt earned. That night back in her room, she sat at the desk and opened a blank document. No classification markings, no headers. She wrote a single sentence. "I am tired." She stared at it for a long time, then deleted it. Not because it wasn't true, because she wasn't ready to let it be official. Her phone buzzed again. Another message. "Assignment pending, stand by." Amanda closed her eyes. She thought of Lena, somewhere safe but unseen, of Rodriguez and the team who'd never speak her name, of Thompson grappling with a truth that didn't fit his framework. She understood now that redemption wasn't about closure. It was about choosing, again and again, whether to carry the weight or finally set it down. And she wasn't sure yet which choice would cost her more. What do you do when the call finally comes, and for the first time you hesitate before answering? Amanda stared at the phone as it vibrated itself quiet on the desk. Assignment pending, stand by. No urgency markers, no countdown, just expectation. She didn't touch it right away. That pause, barely a breath long, felt heavier than any decision she'd made in the field, because hesitation meant something had changed. Not the world, not the work. Sorry. She moved to the window and watched the city settle into night. Lights bloomed across the skyline in uneven patterns. Somewhere below, people were finishing dinners, arguing softly, laughing without knowing why. Normal life continued in defiance of everything done to protect it. Amanda pressed her forehead lightly against the glass. For years, she'd believed clarity only arrived under pressure. That hesitation was weakness. That certainty was forged in moments when options collapsed into necessity. But now, with time stretching instead of compressing, the noise inside her was louder. The phone buzzed again. Location secure, transport in 4 hours. There it was, the narrowing, the familiar pull toward inevitability. She sat back down and opened the drawer she'd avoided since arriving. Inside were the few things she always carried between assignments: a spare notebook, a watch she never wore anymore, a folded piece of paper, edges soft from handling. Rodriguez's message. Still breathing because of you. She read it again, then again. She thought of Lena, recovering somewhere that didn't exist on maps, of the way her voice had steadied once she realized she wasn't alone anymore, of the question she'd asked that night in a whisper meant not to be heard. Do they ever let you stop? Amanda finally understood the answer. They didn't. But you could. The realization didn't arrive with relief. It arrived with fear, because stepping away meant confronting something far more dangerous than any hostile environment. Who she was without the mission. She closed the drawer and stood, moving with deliberate calm, not urgency, intention. The transport would arrive whether she was ready or not. That was how the system worked. But readiness wasn't the same as obedience. Her phone rang again, this time a call. She answered. Yes. Captain Carter, the voice said, familiar, controlled. We need confirmation. Amanda closed her eyes briefly. Images flickered: corridors, deserts, rivers, alleys, faces she carried but never spoke of. I won't be boarding, she said. Silence. Then carefully, that's not a refusal protocol. I know, Amanda replied. It's a boundary. The voice hardened. You're aware of the implications. Yes. You're needed. Amanda exhaled. So was Lena, so were the others. Need doesn't disappear because I step back. You don't get to decide when you're done, the voice said. Amanda opened her eyes. I already did. The line went dead. For a moment she stood perfectly still, waiting for the surge of regret, the panic, the instinct to correct the mistake. None came. Instead, there was a quiet, deep and unfamiliar, like standing in a place where echoes no longer returned. She packed slowly, not to leave immediately, just enough to remind herself that movement was still possible, that life wasn't a single corridor with locked doors. Hours later, as dawn approached, there was a knock. She didn't jump this time. When she opened the door, General Thompson stood there alone. No aides, no security. I thought you might be awake, he said. I usually am. He nodded, stepping inside without being invited. He looked tired, older than she remembered, not defeated, just honest. I heard, he said. I assumed you would. Thompson studied the room. Sparse, temporary, you're burning bridges. Amanda met his gaze. I'm choosing which ones not to rebuild. He considered that. You know what happens to people who walk away. They get replaced, she said, often badly. A flicker of something, respect, maybe, crossed his face. That's the argument that kept me in longer than I should have stayed. Amanda waited, let him speak if he needed to. I spent years believing sacrifice was a finite resource, he continued. That if I just asked enough of the right people, the cost would balance out. He shook his head slightly. It never does. He reached into his coat and placed a small folder on the table. Your record, he said, the part that can exist. Amanda didn't open it. This is as clean as I can make it, Thompson added. You'll never get public acknowledgement, but you won't be erased either. That's enough, she said. He nodded once. You were right, you know, about the signal. I know. No, he corrected gently, about dignity. Thompson turned to leave, then paused. Whatever you do next, make sure it's yours. After he left, Amanda sat down and finally opened the folder. Inside were words that would never tell the full story, but didn't lie. For the first time in years, that felt sufficient. By midday, she was gone. Not disappearing, just moving. She walked along the river again, the same path she'd taken with Mitchell days earlier. The water moved steadily, unconcerned with endings or beginnings. It reminded her that continuity didn't require permission. She passed people who didn't know her name and never would. That anonymity felt different now, not like a burden. Like freedom. Her phone buzzed one last time. No assignment, no pressure. A message from an unknown number. Lena is asking for you. Amanda smiled softly, just once. She typed back, tell her I'm here. She didn't know what came next, teaching, advising, silence, something quieter than war but no less meaningful. For the first time, uncertainty didn't feel like a threat. It felt like space. As the sun climbed higher, Amanda continued walking, blending into the world she'd spent so long protecting from the edges. She carried her past with her, not as armor, not as chains, but as proof. Proof that strength didn't always announce itself. That resilience didn't need witnesses. That sometimes, the bravest act wasn't staying in the fight, but knowing when to step away with your humanity intact. Because dignity doesn't shout. It doesn't demand credit. Sometimes, dignity doesn't even stay. Sometimes, it simply acts.